Welcome, everyone.
Hi there.
If you guys can hear us, go ahead and put something in the chat. I can hear us.
I think this contrast between my blonde hair on the screen and my brunette hair in the dark here never been more drastic. Every time I look at it, I think I really need an updated picture from post blondness in my life, but even more so to that.
It looks lovely.
Thank you. You're very sweet. It was definitely something that went the way of COVID pandemic of trying to pretend I could pass for a blonde and get blonde highlights. It's just one thing that got cut.
Okay, well, I didn't get anything in the chat. If you guys can hear us okay, would you go ahead and put something in the chat? Let's see. I'm wondering if that means that they can hear us okay. There we go. Thank you.
Go.
Erin.
Yay.
Thank you, Allison. Yay. Thank you, Terry.
Yay.
Maybe it was just a little bit of a delay. Well, I appreciate all of you participating because sometimes when you get on, you get a little bit of that like knot in your stomach. Did we do something wrong?
Yeah, are people there? And they are.
Yes, it's nice that you're there. So it's just 7:30, and I think maybe we'll start in a minute. Dana, it's up to you.
That sounds perfect. Just perfect.
Okay, awesome. I know everybody's like wrapping up from their dinner, and I don't know about you guys. My dog's like out here on the floor, happy, waiting. Just haven't eaten. Well, we're very excited that I was mentioning, Lindsay, to Dana that this is really a brand new presentation for us. I mean, everything that we teach in our class and we present all the time, but putting it all together in this one format is great. So I think that everyone's really going to appreciate how strategic it is in terms of, providing very specific guidance around time management and planning. So I am very excited about that.
It's one of the top issues. Both of my kids certainly could use more of it. Definitely.
Well, it's the one thing that it seems like so many people are really, students specifically really want to avoid because they think, oh, I'll get it done faster if I don't do any of this planning. But they actually, that's one of those common myths we'll talk about.
Right. Right. The planning really matters. Okay, I see 7:31, so we'll wait till 7:32, and I'll introduce Debbie and Lindsay.
Welcome again, everybody. Just to remind people that there's the chat here, and we have a lot to go through, but certainly if you have any questions, I will be mostly monitoring the chat. Yes.
Please do let me know if there's anything you'd like for me to do to help.
Okay, thank you, Dana.
Of course.
Yeah, don't worry. We do have we do have everything muted. Actually, in this particular webinar platform, the participants actually can't speak. They can only chat. So feel free to use that chat. We really like that. Usually it's flowing with comments.
And I know where the button is this time to get myself off camera and muted.
Yay.
It'll take me a second, but yes, last time I sort of dithered and you could see me moving my head looking for it.
Dana, it is welcome. I'm telling you, I miss it. Seeing the smiling faces in person. So I don't mind any faces on camera ever.
And Lindsay, I'm gonna stop sharing and let you share so that you can control the slides.
So shall I introduce you two?
Sure.
Okay, well, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dana Milburn from Yorktown PTA. This is brought to you by our PTA's Family Network, chaired by Janet Pence, who has done fantastic work on bringing things to parents and students at our school. This evening, we are thrilled and grateful to have the StudyPro, Debbie Rosen and Lindsay Toms, M.Ed., are the owners of the StudyPro, an executive function and study skills center in McLean. The StudyPro works with students to help them better manage the process of school. This means helping students become better planners, time managers, initiators, organizers, and completers of work. Most students aren't taught these skills, yet they are so deeply needed to be successful at school and throughout their careers. You can also find the StudyPro online at www.thestudypro.com. We are thrilled and grateful to have this evening with you all, and take it away, Debbie and Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Dana. And thanks. So she
Just real
disappeared
quick with that
fast.
camera.
Wow, okay. So thank you so much for having us and welcome everybody. I was mentioning earlier a couple of housekeeping things. Please use the chat if you have any questions. This will be recorded, so you don't have to worry about taking screenshots. We'll share all of that. There's actually a page, thestudypro.com/Yorktown, that has our last presentation, which is more of an introduction to executive function skills and how they, really appear in a lot of common school behaviors. And then this is a little bit deeper dive in reducing homework friction, specifically talking about time management and planning. And then we have a third webinar that we're very excited to do with Dr. Andrea Brenner, who's a college transition specialist, but also spent 25 years at American University and is the co-author of the book called How to College. And that's going to be on April 7th. And at the end of this presentation, we'll share a link, but you can always email us at info@thestudybro.com. But if you're on here, then you'll get that from us directly or certainly through the Yorktown PTA network. So if you want to move forward, Lynn, so really why we're here tonight is to talk specifically about time management and planning. And certainly a lack of time management and planning can rear its ugly head in a lot of ways that are probably familiar with some of you. And that includes things like missing work or late work, of course, waiting till the last minute. Therefore, we're doing things like rushing. Maybe we're not doing as well on a test that we want to because we kind of waited to that last minute. We didn't really plan things out. And so what we really want to focus on is, our very specific skills and strategies that will help to just make school a lot easier. It will make it easier to get started. It'll make it easier to plan for short and long-term projects. And it also, more importantly than anything really, is just reduce the amount of stress in your home and in, the lives of yourselves and your students. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Lindsay to go a little bit deeper on, why does this even matter? Because there are a lot of things that are probably very counterintuitive that Lindsay's going to share, but Lindsay will share with us about why time management and planning really do matter.
Right. I mean, this question that you see here is a little bit of even a rhetorical question. I'm sure everyone, if you have any ideas, feel free to put them in the chat. But why does time management and planning matter? We all know because we know when it goes wrong. We know when it fails, when we don't have the best time management, when planning doesn't go according to plan. So really what that can look like is what you see here, what Debbie was mentioning. If you or any of your students feel like they've never had enough time to do anything, they work on the project last minute, they forget about important due dates, important events that they have on their calendar, but then they just kind of like breeze past it. These are some of the challenges that we see. And really the reason why, especially if you were on our last webinar, we mentioned that it's these executive functions. They're developing now. So I'll just leave you with a little bit here is that keep in mind that as we talk tonight is these are developmental. They're developing through your mid-20s, but your executive functions really are your ability to set a goal first and foremost, and then manage your thoughts and your emotions and your actions to achieve the goal. So if we think about what we saw here on this previous slide, some of this friction with our planning or time management, these executive functions are what allow us to plan and manage our time. So you see here, I'll just point out a few. If you think about that inhibition, so say I have an hour and I have an hour to write this report and I block off the time and I set the intention to, and then my phone keeps dinging. That's my inhibition, is my ability to ignore a distraction. That something tries to grab my attention and I don't take action on it. Because I think we all can understand the experience of, oh yeah, I'm going to just check one email. and then you're in your inbox for like hours and hours responding to different ones. That's a form of inhibition too. It's, can I see something? Can I hear something? Can I know about something and not take action on it in that moment? And then I'll point out one more here before I move on, but the other one is the initiation. So, how often have you set off and set that intention to block off that hour, write that report? And then when that hour rolls along, all of a sudden getting started seems a lot harder than it was when I set that goal to initiate and work on that report. So, those are just two of the executive functions that allow us to follow through on a plan and manage our time. But we're going to go through some others as you see through the strategies on how to resolve some of that friction. Now, what you notice is that time management is a study skill. So, what Debbie was referring to is that we need these skills to have success in school and in life. We need both our executive functions and we need these study skills. The point being is they have to learn them. They're learning them through school, through trial and error, a lot of little bumps and mistakes along the road here. And they are skills that they can learn to develop. Until they're fully developed through that mid 20s here, we want to scaffold them with the support and the strategies and have them realize that they're getting supported with strategies. Not by I'm getting supported by mom or dad are doing it for me, but that they're learning strategies while those skills are developing. So, what it looks like for a student though, when they're in school, we know that the point of school is to develop skills for their adulthood. But what it feels like for a kid is that it's a lot of stuff happening to them. So we have this is part of our course that we teach the students, and we start off by bringing them onto the ball game, into the ball game, and onto the field. By first acknowledging this is what it feels like for them. That through school, teachers teaching some stuff, then they're assigning some work, and then there's some kind of test at the end of the unit. This is all stuff happening to them. And really what is happening is it's going through all of their classes every single year. It's not just about learning about how to write a paper in English or how to solve fractions in math. What it is all of these skills of when the teacher is teaching, when the teacher is assigning work, and the teacher is giving a test, do I have the skills to show my knowledge in these areas? So where we bring the kids into the game a little bit is by teaching them the real point of school here is when the teacher is teaching, you have a role to play. Your goal as a student is to receive the information the best way possible. So you can retain it when they're assigning work and apply it to their homework, apply it to a project. And then can you recall it? Can you retrieve it on demand? And then apply it on a test or an assessment there. So when you receive and you retain and recall, I can use strategies to make that process a little bit easier. It's the teacher's job to teach you. It's your job to try to receive that information the best way possible. Point is, the takeaway is that they can have an active role here. So why we're telling this to you about a time management and planning webinar here is because there's this thing called friction that can break this learning cycle here. So if I don't have a planning system, if I'm cramming, if I'm passively studying because I'm studying at the last minute, if I have that big scary P word of procrastination in my habits, then I'm breaking this learning cycle and I'm making it more difficult to receive that information, to retain it, to hold on to it, and then recall it easier on the test. We introduced this word of friction to say, you can repair it. You do have a role here that you can use strategies here to repair this learning cycle. So I'll let Debbie kind of go through some of those other frictions, but I'm sure they're probably pretty familiar to a lot of parents here.
Yeah, so just to pick up on what Lindsay was saying, what we really see overall, and the message overall, of course, you can read some of these areas of friction, is that our goal for students is that by learning what their role is at school and that they can play an active role throughout this learning cycle in every single class from elementary school through college and beyond if they go to graduate school, is it to say that that friction will exist in every class through every school all the way through graduate school if they don't learn strategies, if they don't learn what can we do to reduce or eliminate missing assignments, what can we do to reduce or eliminate the times that we're surprised by how long an assignment will take. And by doing that, it again reduces stress, it makes us more efficient, it gives us more time back. And a lot of times we are asked by parents, what can we do, to make our student more interested in going to a study skills class or learning how to plan and manage? And, our answer really is that those of the students that learn this actually get much more time back. And that's the big buy-in. That's the big aha, I think, for most students, is that if we can use a study skills kind of system and we have strategies to be better planners and better time managers, then we get a lot more time back. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So if you want to move on, Lens. But sometimes what happens is that when we're not using some of these systems, can actually end up looking to us as parents that our students or children don't have the same goals that we do. The goals of, doing really well in school, getting great grades in school, working really hard. Maybe they don't have the same goals as, caring as much as we expect them to. But what you might have heard from us before, if you've heard us speak, and because we say it over and over again every chance we get, is that really it's not that they don't care. All these students, they really do care very much, and they do want to be successful. It's really that some of these skills that we talked about earlier, those executive function skills or those study skills, and particularly tonight, time management and planning, are just underdeveloped. And so that's really what we're moving into now, is what does it look like to have those underdeveloped skills, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, exactly what Doug said. So if you think about those executive functions, your ability to set a goal and then handle that goal, manage your thoughts, feelings, actions throughout the whole process. So if we think about the goal of getting homework done, I just want to show this slide to point out that a goal can actually have many, many, many different mini goals within that one goal. So if you think about, okay, my goal tonight is to get my homework done. Well, it's kicked off by when the teacher assigns homework. And then you can see all these stuff in here. I check Canvas, I have the materials, I plan my time, I manage my time, blah, 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 blah. And all this cycle goes back in. Is Am I remembering to submit it back on Canvas or put it in my backpack and then turn it in school? So you can imagine that each step along every goal that you see here requires those executive functions and study skills that we were talking about. So what Debbie was referring to is that it's not because they don't care. It's not because that goal disappeared that they didn't want to do that homework. It's not because they don't care for the quality of their work, because they need strategies throughout this process, not just about the initial, hey, my goal is to get the homework done. We want to help them throughout this whole process here with the strategies.
And Lynn,
So,
before you
yeah.
move off that slide, I was just going to mention this is a really great slide, because often if you have heard us speak before, even if not, it's a really good slide to visualize when we talk about a barrier and putting together strategy. A barrier can be any of these blue boxes, right? So when we say to our kids, do you have homework or did you study for the test? That's not that helpful, because there are all these things inside of that they may not be able to do. So that when parents say, well, they told me they studied, or they told me they didn't have homework, the truth of the matter is maybe they didn't check Canvas, right? Maybe they ran out of time, maybe they didn't know how to start. And so it's really helpful when we use the words need behind the behavior. What is the need? What is the barriers? Where's the friction? This is the exact kind of like visualization that I think really helps to explain that.
It does. And I'll make the point is like from the executive function coach lens of for 2 years with the remote learning, I felt like I had just gotten a lot of our kids to get into the habit of clicking submit online. And then they shifted back to in person. And now we're kind of like starting again of, hey, remember, we might need a strategy to remember what is it an online assignment that I'm submitting, or is it an in person assignment that I'm submitting? Sometimes the goals are ever changing. It seems like a moving target. So the big takeaway that we have in our mission of the Study Pro is to have the kids walk away knowing that I'm not always going to know what the barrier is. I'm not always going to know where the friction is going to be, but I do know that I can resolve it. I can be a problem solver with strategies. Some of those problems that they have to solve pretty often here is in reference to that homework. So my goal is to complete it. It could go wrong that even though I plan to do it the night before, all of a sudden there's more homework than I expected to, or that I usually have on a Thursday night, right? Or I might be learning how to estimate my time and I'm a constant underestimator. I think it's going to take 20 minutes, but then when I actually get in there and read the directions, I realize there's way more challenging parts to it. There's multiple parts to it, or it's requiring other sources that I need. Anything that can add that friction that all of a sudden that 20-minute assignment might actually take 45, an hour and a half. Now all of a sudden my goal needed to change, and that's where your planning comes into mind. As I have to plan for the unexpected, that when I know what I have to do, I actually have to know all the parts of it. And another goal that we often have is I want to do well on a test. That really is a goal of all of your students, no matter if you're not seeing it through their actions yet. What this goal within the goal is I want to do well, but do I know how to study? I know that the test is coming up. I studied over multiple days. Well, other more urgent stuff might pop up into their awareness. So they might be procrastinating on that studying. That might be a low priority for them. And then how do I manage my time within the studying? So all of these that you see here is can interfere and provide roadblocks for the goals. What we want to do and what we're going to talk about for the majority of tonight is how do we overcome, what are some strategies that they can use to overcome some of those barriers.
Yeah, and really just to put this another way, what we hope you take out of this presentation beyond just very specific strategies of time management planning is that, there really are barriers. And when we would talk to our students about maybe something that's going wrong, rather than asking, do you have homework? Did you study for your test? It's really, much more specific questions, or if they're challenged, much more specific questions about what their barriers might be, right? And just helping them, oof, what's really challenging for you, or I know that it's so hard to figure out sometimes what you have on Canvas. Is that something that you're, really comfortable? Can you teach me how to do that? Or, just really trying to get involved more in the process side of it. You want to move forward, Linz? I might be frozen, or she might be frozen.
I think my sound might be cutting out, but
Oh, okay. You want to move forward?
can you hear me?
Why don't you, yeah, why don't you go ahead and just keep going on the next slide. Can you hear me? Oops. Sorry, guys. Okay, I think you're back, Linz. Nope, maybe not. I think she's gonna, I'm gonna go ahead and share, and then I'll keep going. Oh, there you go. Well, I'm going to go ahead and start until I can see her going. So one of the first strategies that we wanted to talk about was the idea that it really is important, no matter how old your students is for them to really have an understanding of what time they actually have to do their work. And sometimes we're really going to be shifting the responsibility from the parent to the child to actually be showing, to actually um, have them take responsibility versus, that you have soccer on Wednesday night, you really have to do this. And so what we really call this is a work windows calendar. And what you're really looking for, of course, with all of their other responsibilities is to understand what their white space is. And that helps in multiple ways, right? One is, as it says here, prevents procrastination, because if you have a big test on Friday and here we are on, Tuesday, that Wednesday and Thursday look pretty busy here and there's not a lot of time to study. And the second is just really just getting a sense and a rhythm of like, at what time do I have to do my work? And Lizzie, go ahead if you can hear me now.
I can. So hopefully you can hear me okay here. And I won't add too much more, except this is just one of our favorite because it is multiple benefits to one strategy. By seeing all of this, it helps them initiate, because now I can't really lie to myself if I see it all laid out in front of me, hard evidence. I can't lie to myself and tell myself I'm going to do it Thursday, because I really do not have the window of time on Thursday. It helps with that initiation, and it can help relieve the stress of like, oh, I don't have enough time. We've all thought that, like, I just never have enough time. Well, actually, if I count my study halls, hey, if I count that little block of time during the midday, I could get my homework done during that time. So it's a multi-level benefit to one strategy. It helps them know what time they have, it helps them use the time they have, and it helps reduce that stress.
And so now that I know the time that I have, the question is like, how do I know what to do in that time? And so one of the things that we really like to emphasize is that, the kids do know the due date. but that doesn't necessarily tell them what there is to do. And so we really wanted to talk about it. And remember, as it says here, just knowing the due date doesn't really help you get started. So that whole thing of like, that's due on this date, that's not what we call an initiation strategy. So we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Exactly. So a lot of the objections that we hear in our profession, and I'm sure parents hear at home too, to using a planner or having a planning system is everything's posted online. Why do I need to redo it? Well, there's a difference. This is what you see here on your screen is a screenshot of, I'm sure what's familiar, Canvas calendar that has the due dates on a calendar or the due dates on their dashboard. And this is where kids are frequently going to check what they have to do. Now, what this doesn't tell you is how to get it done. And the barrier that this can provide is I'm going to check what's due tomorrow and do that. And that's what really they learned how to do in elementary school. And they really could do that. The work that was being assigned was for tomorrow, that was due for tomorrow. And then we introduced block scheduling. And then the work got a little bit harder, and it wasn't expected to be done in a night. It was expected to be done over multiple nights. The first strategy that we do when we're planning with a student is to help them develop their own planning system. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you how using Canvas as the tool is they can plan their own specific to-dos. There's a difference between putting the due date on the calendar versus planning your own to-dos. So what you see here, this is a screenshot, this is Canvas. You can put your own to-dos in Canvas. Every single student that I've ever used this with didn't know about it. And then I had a student this week who loved coming back to me and telling me, I told my friend and she was blown away. Like, what a great tool and strategy that they just didn't even know about. If you go to the Canvas calendar, you add your own personal to-do. So all of a sudden, that one due date that says, I have to do pages 16 through 18, 1 through 31 odd, and it's due on Friday, well, I can break it up and I can do some of it on Monday and I can do some of it on Tuesday because I know that my Thursday night is actually pretty full with practices. So I don't really have the time available there. By taking ownership over the plan, it removes that stress and also helps them initiate on that day. It also can prevent the friction of working at the last minute because I'm actually taking action over what I'm going to do each day. So this is the first strategy. There's many, many different ways to plan. We get often asked, what's the best way? The best way is that allows them to set their own specific to-dos on a specific day. And the best one really is the one that they will do. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how do we actually get those chunks.
Right. So now, as Lindsay said, we know what the due date is. We even know how to be able to, manage our nightly work. But now when we have longer term work, really the question is, how do you find out the to-dos and how do you make things a little bit more manageable? And that's really what we talk about with chunking. So when, as it says here, when you chunk it, it's easier to get started. So not only is chunking helpful to make sure that you really understand what is involved in assignment, but it's also helpful to make sure that you can manage that assignment over time.
Exactly. So sometimes assignments are chunked when they're younger for them. So then when they shift to middle school and high school, it becomes much more hard for them and more difficult. So we have this strategy here just called the chunk it strategy, easy to remember, that helps them know what the steps are when they're given a long-term paper or project with an assignment sheet. Now, what this can help with, and parents should know, is, hey, when we know that they have a paper or project, we often want them to start the night it's assigned. But what they hear is, oh my gosh, I have 2 weeks and I have so much other things to do. I have 2 weeks. That's just not a priority right now. What we want them to take away is that you can get started the night it's assigned by using the strategy and chunk it. And the first thing is, am I aware of the due date? Do I have the time to review it the day before? And can I find out what the important information is? And that's that first C, check the date, reserve the day before, and then H, that highlight the key information. So I'm going to show you what that actually looks like on the next page here. So this is a big, scary, overwhelming capstone paper project. And what we do is when we're teaching the students in our classes, hey, there's a lot of filler information here. That's contextual, but it's not really telling you actions of what you have to do. So we teach them to read and scan for the important information and take a highlighter, highlight that important key information. Then you can take those highlights and turn them into your chunks. So now I can take okay, I have 5 things to chunk. I can spread that out over my 10 days and do even maybe one every other day. The key takeaway here is that now they have a script for know how to get started on a long-term project like this, and now they know how to chunk on their own. They're not dependent on the teacher for saying, I'm going to require you to submit your thesis this day, or I'm going to require you to submit your draft on this day. Now they can take the ownership of knowing how to chunk and then how to get started. And so they're not feeling so overwhelmed when they see a big, scary capstone project rubric assignment sheet like this one.
Yeah, and I will share a story that Lindsay knows because there's actually such a benefit to chunking that we don't even really think of. First of all, one of the things that I think is really helpful for some of these bigger assignments is to actually print this off. And what happens often if you print this off and you can visualize this without any yellow on it, it really can feel, as Lindsay said, very overwhelming. And so there can be just a barrier right there for starting. I was working with a college student who had something very similar to this. It was maybe 2 or 3 pages long. And I asked, asked him, would you normally do with this? When do you look at this? And, he said, oh, I just leave it online and I'll read it. And and I said, well, if you read it now and then you came back to it like a day later or 2 days later, did you remember everything? He said, well, maybe not. So when we talk about friction, one specific example that's a really great example is that when you just read this kind of an assignment sheet or a rubric, and then you have to come back and reread it again, that's friction because you're actually like touching that paper multiple times and you're spending a lot of energy checking and then rechecking because you're not going to remember everything that's on there. What's nice about highlighting it is it gives the reader, then you already said to yourself, I give you permission to not look at anything but the highlighted stuff, and I know that every time there's a little box or something circled, those are the important things that I have to remember. And if I've checked that box off, I know I'm done with it. So it's an incredibly efficient way of managing that type of project. So chunking isn't just about, breaking things down. If I have 10 problems, I'm going to do 2 at a time. Sure, that's a very simple way of chunking. But chunking here is an initiation strategy. It's a relief for working memory. It's a relief for our planning systems because we have little boxes, right? And you can even say these 3 boxes I'm going to do on this day, and these 3 boxes or 4 boxes I'm going to do on these other days, or break it down that way. So I'll move it to the next slide and you can talk, pick it up here, Linz.
Exactly. So what we have here is just like all the benefits that Debbie was just going through, but what those benefits of chunking are. And I'll just point out that what you're seeing here, that Kanban board, that example, that's a way to chunk and plan in one. So what this is just sticky notes up on a wall. And this is something that students have used recurringly. Okay, so what am I to do? What am I doing? And what am I done? So all they can say is they don't have to make a long-term commitment. Sometimes there's a big barrier around long-term planning. And this is what I will say to you, that I've had kids crying in my office. This is the reason why I don't want to plan, because when it comes down to the day of, I sometimes have a really difficult time initiating, and I don't want to let myself down, and I don't want to let my parents down, and I don't want to feel like crap that day because my goal wasn't able to be met. So that's when I would introduce a strategy like this Kanban board. Okay, we're not going to make a long-term commitment. What we're going to do is we're going to isolate those chunks, and we're going to say we're going to pick a sticky note a day. We're going to just pick a sticky note off the wall a day, and that's our goal for that day. And then we have kind of like our lower stakes ones that are a little bit easier. So, hey, if you're having a low energy day, that's when you're actually going to insert your images into your presentation. That's okay. You go energy day and still make progress on that goal. Any progress, anything above a 0 is killing that habit of procrastination. So that's the take here, is that there's different ways to get to the same benefit that you can feel from chunking, of that less stress, easier time getting started here.
So now when it comes to time to execute, no, you're good. Can you hear me? When it comes time to execute, right, we really want to take what we know we can get on Canvas and a list, whatever list of work we have, and create a plan. And we're going to talk about what the elements of a plan are, because the elements of a plan are really important. But the most important thing to remember is that a list is not a plan. A list can be very overwhelming. It doesn't give any prioritization. And, we'll share a little bit more about why it's not, a list in itself, especially when work gets difficult, is not going to, is something that's not going to, that's still going to create a lot of friction in the process.
Exactly. So if you think back to those executive functions that allow us to plan and manage our time here, adults who have fully developed frontal lobes here, there's a lot of this planning that is done in the background, that's done behind the scenes. So when we put a due date on the calendar, when we say we have an event on a calendar, there's a lot of these background information. So we know the due date, we know what the requirements are, we know how to do it. We might know the best strategies to get that accomplished, and we know the steps to get that goal met. All of that is happening in the background, but we have to remember that we are asking kids to plan and plan more and manage their time more than we ever have. So we have to give them a strategy to get the same benefits that we are using every time that we might just slap a due date on the calendar and know what to do with that due date. So how we do that, the next slide I'm going to show you is another example of a strategy that has multiple layers, just like our work windows calendar. This is the work plan that we use at our center here. And what's built in by a strategy about making a plan for that night's homework that includes current work and chunks of upcoming work is that it forces them into, in a very positive, supportive way, but forces them into adding the specifics to the assignment. So we have that assignment column, and it's always in the same order: history, math, science, English, foreign language, because you're going to hear this a lot. It helps offload the taxation on their working memory, that I don't have to remember, did I check my science? Did I go through biology? Do I have anything in science? Do I have anything in math coming up? No, by going through it, we want to go through each one. And if there's nothing, we write none, but that's okay. But by going in the same order, it helps them have that planning strategy built in there. And then it also has that time estimate in there. The time estimate asks them to preview the assignment. How do we get a time estimate? We got to read the directions here. And then they have that order in the order that they're going to do this in. So what we help them and coach them through is how to order their assignments, to be considering what are the priorities, what's important to get done, and then how to start with something easy to warm their brains up, and then shift to something hard, the hardest thing, the most likely thing that they are to avoid or procrastinate on, and then shift back to easy. Then they're avoiding the traps of, if I'm starting with all the hard stuff, I'm not starting until 10 o'clock at night because I'm dreading the hard thing. But the same thing is true if I start with the easy stuff and leave all the hard stuff for the end of the night when I'm the most fatigued and burnt out. That's not going to work either. So we coach them through this strategy of how to order and prioritize their assignment. Again, this is one tool. This is a homework plan, but it has multiple strategies built in there. Specifics, previewing, how to order their assignments and prioritize here.
And one of the great things about starting with something easy is, just like we would with our bodies, we're not going to just go off in a sprint. We're going to warm our bodies up. And it's really the same type of thing with planning. We want to warm our brains up. And, we don't get up in the morning and have our, coffee and jump in or just jump right into our spreadsheet. We have our coffee, maybe check our email. We do things that are kind of naturally, because of that mature prefrontal cortex, naturally kind of a warm up. And then we might go to the hardest thing, to be honest, when maybe we're really fresh. And, there's a saying that that we like to use, but we actually heard it really emphasized from one student to another. It's like, don't be a jerk to your future self, because you don't want to wait until you're the most tired to do the assignment that is most stressful to you. So by going easy, hard, and getting that really that frog done earlier in the evening, then you're kinder to your future self. And by having this plan, there's a real a lot of benefits, because then you obviously know when the finish line is, and you start to get a sense of like, oh, I have a really great view of everything that's in front of me. And one of the things that Lindsay talked about, was that working memory. And by being specific, which is another strategy, that helps us, because if we go back and think about this plan, when we're very specific in the column of what your assignment is, math, these specific questions, and history, these specific pages in the specific video, then again, we don't have to go back and check again. We know that everything is down there. And so we really do ask our our students to be very specific as they're writing down their plans, because as it says here, you save time by not having to recheck the details. So do you want to talk a little bit more about being specific?
We'll just jump to some examples of how to do that. So the benefit, of course, is all that Debbie said, but really, how do we do that when we plan and goals for the night? Is we have some example here on the slide of, I'm not going to just say like do my math homework. So do my math. I'm going to have to go back into Canvas. I'm going to have to click through the multiple pages here. I'm going to have to go find out what page in the textbook was it? How many problems do I have to do? That's not efficient, and it doesn't help them get started, doesn't help them estimate their time. So these are just some of the ways that they can be specific in planning. And I have to tell the funny story of a student who I was having them try this out and be more specific in their planning. And they're like, oh, you're just a teacher. You just want me to write more. Now, this is from our book and our course here. Now, you can abbreviate this. Do you have to write do problems 1 through 15 odd page? No, you can use abbreviations. Of course, it can be shorter. But I had to laugh and be like, okay, well, try it tonight and then report back to me. And then he's like, okay, yeah, no, it actually was a lot easier to just have it all listed out very specifically, so then I could get through my homework much, much more efficiently. And it helped me picture the finish line. Doing math can feel overwhelming. Studying can feel overwhelming, but giving them a target to start and a target to finish, much easier. So this is kind of what that end product can look like. This is just an actual student's plan from our homework center and how they plan their time. And then what we love is just some of those reflection about what were their roadblocks and what were their strategies that they used to overcome them again here. So multi-level strategies are built into this one homework plan that you see here.
Sorry, my microphone's muted. Do you want to move on to getting started?
Yeah, so really what you've heard a lot about and seen a lot, I'm sure, is that, hey, there's missing work. My kid's procrastinating. They don't know how to get started. They don't care. So really what we want to show you here is a little bit of why they might be having that trouble starting and how they fell into maybe that procrastination cycle that you all are probably painfully aware of and have seen before. When they know what they have to do, when they really do know, they have that paper coming up, but they're just not doing it. So David's going to pull up here one of our favorite
So
videos.
here's the brain of a non-procrastinator.
Whoops, ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's saying,
Here's the brain of a non-procrastinator.
non-procrastinator.
Now, here's my brain. Of a non-procrastinator. Now, here's my brain. There is a difference. Both brains have a rational decision maker in them, but the procrastinator's brain also has an instant gratification monkey. Now, what does this mean for the procrastinator? Well, now sometimes it makes sense to be doing things that are easy and fun, like when you're having dinner or going to bed or enjoying well-earned leisure time. That's why there's an overlap. Sometimes they agree. But other times, it makes much more sense to be doing things that are harder and less pleasant for the sake of the big picture, and that's when we have a conflict. And for the procrastinator, that conflict tends to end a certain way every time.
All of you procrastinators out there very well.
I think that we couldn't get the video to work perfectly, so it's just a little hard to hear. So why don't you go ahead and explain it, Linz?
Right. Well, what I love is what he started by saying is that everyone has this rational decision maker in their brains. And what I like to point out for students is that that's your frontal lobe. Those are your executive functions. That's what allows you to see the future, see the big picture, not be a jerk to your future self, plan ahead. Now, everyone who's growing up right now, the instant gratification monkey is a little bit stronger than that rational decision maker. So it's going to win out. So when they're in that dark playground of they're scrolling on YouTube or TikTok or they're chatting with their friends and you see the procrastination cycle happening, is how do we get them out of that? And the panic monster can usually shift us out of it. All of us as adults know the panic monster very well. When the deadline approaches, when we get an email that says something's missing or late, oh, that can make something much, much easier to get started. And that's what they're triggered off of too. And oftentimes, what's the unhealthy dynamic that parents and kids can have is that we become their panic monster. We become the panic monster, and we try to become the panic monster and help them initiate by reminding them of the due date. But if we keep in mind that they don't need the reminders of the due date, they know the due date. They need strategies to get started. So what we teach them in the class is, okay, how do I get out of that dark playground and how do I actually initiate? So we're going to go through here some deeper strategies on actually how to get started when we might be feeling like the instant gratification monkey is winning. Might be frozen, but we're going to go forward here. But first, we acknowledge where their friction might be. So I won't stop too long on this one, but there can be friction from getting started, is because we're such a big part of my grade. It's overwhelming, and there's multiple parts to it. So how we can help a student is introducing a strategy called the START routine. And a START routine is anything that can trigger. It's 3 actions that you take all the time that help you trigger and start your homework. So if you think about your day, your working day, I know mine is usually I get out my notepad, I check my email, I check my calendar. Like, those are my 3 initiation tasks that help me start my day, warm up my day. What we're going to do is teach them how to create their own START routine that helps them get ramped into their homework and start a little bit faster. So what you see here is 3 steps, and we're going to give you some inspiration maybe on the next slide here of what some of those START routine activities might look like. Really what we want to think about is, do we need to lower barriers? Do we need to lower the barriers of, I'm feeling tired. I just had 8 hours in school. How do I change my emotional state and make it easier to get started? So some of those things are listening to music, getting your favorite drink. Adults use coffee all the time. Changing clothes. Maybe getting a little bit of exercise, taking the dog for a walk, even chewing gum, getting a snack. Chewing gum is a strategy I recommend a lot because students, especially after a long, stressful day, will clench their teeth. So that's a way to lower the emotional barrier here, change their emotional state. Another one can be making it novel. Novelty can trigger and help produce some dopamine in that frontal lobe and make it easier to get started. So can we change the locations? Can we change our Chrome browser to dark mode, switch your desktops, clean off your workspace? Any of those can help make the novelty, make it easier to get started. And then the last one is removing barriers. This is, hey, I got to plug my phone in. I got to put it in a different room. I got to put it on airplane mode. Maybe I need to put on noise canceling headphones or mute my notifications, close any other tabs. But what we have the students do is consider some of these actions and pick a couple, 1, 2, 3, that are always part of their START routine. And that last one is, hey, check Canvas, make a homework plan for that night with that priority order of what order I'm going to do my assignments in. So this is a great one to get them, that you're helping with strategies as a parent, to just say, hey, what are some START routines that you use and as an adult, and get them starting to think about what their START routine can look like for their homework. That's one. And then what we're going to go into is a few more here. But so once they kind of have their homework assignments for the night and have their homework plan, so that, say they get to their English assignment, hey, there's built-in strategies for initiation that I need to use in for this too. So, hey, if I'm having trouble picking my topic, could I just use a whiteboard? Could I generate my ideas? Can I chunk it into steps? Can I try to connect with the question? If I'm stuck and I'm just really not sure, tonight I was working with a student working on an entrepreneur project, a math assignment that Debbie might know a little bit about here, that how can we get this kid engaged into this? Let's watch a little video on the topic. Anything that you see here on the screen are what we call Onramps, which is just about helping a student on-ramp into an assignment to make it a little bit easier. Some examples here about for English specifically. Yeah, go ahead, Sri.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I'll just talk about a couple of the examples. Um, because as you were saying, the whole idea really is that we assume sometimes that students really know how to get started. And so the on-ramp is really this opportunity for us to sit down and help them, what we always say, on the process side. So rather than saying, let's do this for you or help you, write all of this, what we really want to do is help them with the strategy of how to get started. And one of the ways when we talk about, you know, rewording and breaking part of the question is because we assume that they always understand the question, but the truth is that they may not. And some questions, if you've ever sat down and looked sometimes at this homework, even in middle school, can be really daunting. This question was, what emotional needs did Haleb's excessive drinking, gambling, and promiscuity meet? Which can be a pretty challenging question for this happened to be a middle schooler. And so one way to chunk the work is that the very first day say, you know what, let's just sit down and reword the questions so that we make sure that we really understand. So what feelings of pain did Haleb have? What caused them? How did these bad habits help him avoid these feelings? And so day one of the chunk is just rewording the questions so that when that student goes back, they know that they can more easily get into that homework assignment because they know they understand every single one of the questions. So that barrier that we talked about is being knocked down with the strategy, and then they can more easily start. So there's a lot of benefits to that. Another strategy is an example for an on-ramp is to connecting to the, we call it connecting to the question or connecting to the keywords. So there was a question I was working with in a student who was applying for a school. How will you show up for this particular school community if you accepted the school? And she was really having a hard time answering. And it occurred to me, she does not really, so what's the keyword there? The keyword's really about showing up, right? So she didn't really understand what it meant to show up. So we talked a little bit about what it meant to show up and what do you think it means to show up in the world? And just a little brainstorm, even using a little whiteboard, what do you think that means to show up? And even to explain, I explained how our tree fell and someone stopped and, gave us an, was really showed up for us, when we, in our time of need. Um, anyway, so the whole idea is that we really wanted to we really want to give kids ways to remove the barriers, what we sometimes call those wall of awful to starting assignment, and not just assume that they know how to do it. So this are just two examples of an on-ramp, and the final one is about right here is about cutting the fluff. And that just means taking something that might be very overwhelming, like a lot of the text on the left, and make it a little bit shorter on the right, very similar to what we did in the chunking. So we'll move on to another example that Lindsay worked on with her student.
So I'll just explain this quickly about math is that this was a very overwhelming. When we pulled it up, it was about 24 pages front and back and had a lot of different parts to it. And immediately when the students saw this, and if I'm honest, a little bit on my part too, is I had a fight or flight reaction. It was like, oh my goodness, I knew that there's a lot on this page for this kid to do, and we actually only had about an hour, and mom was going to be picking him up, and this was already overdue. So how are we going to get this goal met of getting this math assignment done? So the first strategy was like, okay, let's just look at it, read the directions, and let's highlight it. So we knew we needed to find the slope, so we knew there's going to be the formula. So he started by just saying, okay, let me write down the formula. And I said, okay, what goes in the numerator? The y's. What goes in the denominator? The x's. So let's go through and let's highlight what we're going to put in the numerator and what's going to go in the denominator. And just that removed the barrier of feeling emotionally overwhelmed, and it gave him an action, a target to help him initiate. And then once he was initiated, he actually realized it wasn't so hard. Now that I could do this first one, I can complete this much, much easier than I thought. What we were working on here is that when I have that reaction that this is going to take forever, I don't know how to do it, you have two choices here. You can put it off and say, I'm going to do it later. I'm going to do it tomorrow. There's always good reasons. Even a good one of like, oh, I'm going to do that tomorrow with my teacher. But let's try a strategy first before we put off, before we procrastinate. And that's what the takeaway here is. Even just writing down the formula and starting with a highlighter, and then were on-ramped into this math assignment and able to get it actually completed. Those were kind of the examples for on-ramping for both English assignments and then math.
And so, as we kind of gone through the strategies that we have for planning and for time management, how to get started, we kind of want to wrap up a little bit of this whole strategy section with this idea that there's a lot of myths and misconceptions, and we've kind of gone through some during this conversation, that kids may not care about their work, or they can just use a calendar alone or a list for planning, or that once they have a plan, they can always follow through on it. And you can see these on the left, that you can multitask and you can have your phone on silent. But the truth of the matter is that when you're talking about the executive functions, developing executive functions, all of these things are really creating friction. And hopefully you see why by through the conversation that we had tonight, that, for example, the friction with just using a list for planning is, again, we don't understand what the due date is. We don't understand what the prioritization is. We're not understanding specifically what the assignment is. And the idea that, it's faster and I can get started faster if I don't make a plan. Again, we know that the tax on the working memory, the fact that we may miss specifically assignments, that we're not doing them in the highest priority order, that some of these things are really the challenges. And the truth of the matter is that, if we can use this kind of a strategy system or study skill system, even if it's, just working on planning and chunking up your work, and with some initiation strategies, we can really take a lot of the friction out of the process. Lindsay, do you want to talk about a little bit more about these?
No, I mean, I think that's the key to it. And I'll just point out with a student that I was working with that just said the most profound thing that I just said to smile, that we hadn't been coaching for a while. He kind of fell out of the habit of planning on his own, and he felt some friction. So he came back and he said to me, my brain, my ADHD brain really, really wants me to get started right away. And so it makes like feeling like planning is going to take a long time. Well, actually go down just a little bit to make a plan, save myself some time and headache. Later realization of, hey, it might feel like it's gonna feel uncomfortable while we're getting used to developing these skills. The same way, like learning how to run and your quads are burning because it's a new skill and it's a new muscle you're building. The same thing can happen with these planning and time management skills too. It's going to feel a little uncomfortable until it doesn't. The benefits far outweigh and feel really, really rewarding there. But I think that's just what I would point out was miss of not the time to plan.
Yeah, your sound is getting, at least for me, a little bit garbled there, but I will wrap this part up, and then I know we had a question, and maybe you have some other questions. But as we have said throughout the presentation, time management and planning really are so foundational because it can help to relieve friction in so many other areas. And as Lindsay started to say, we really have to remember that even if students start with those skills, they aren't going to go just up and to the right. That they are going to what feels like regress with them, even if they've seen some success and things have gone well. So please, as we always say, water the seeds. Those seeds are those things that we want to grow, which are these types of executive function and study skills. And let's really rely on the kids to start to try to build some of these skills, because as we're going into the later years of high school, or certainly into college, we know that we want our students to have those skills and be ready before they go, which kind of leads us to this next, I'll do this one first, to this next webinar that we're going to have, which is ensuring that our students are prepared, and what can we be doing now when they're in high school to make sure that they are prepared to be independent when they go to college. So much of what we have right now has a lot of structure around it. Even when you go into high school, the minute you walk into the school, from the minute you walk out, it's a very structured environment. And as we know, college is very different than that. And so we're further taxing those executive functions, because we're asking the kids to make decisions all the time about whether I get up out of bed to go to class, where it's probably not that much of an option now. And so we're very excited to partner with Andrea Brenner, as we said, who is the co-author of the book, How to College. And then I'll just mention that we also have an upcoming program at the StudyPro for anyone interested. We have the president and medical director of the Child Mind Institute, which is, obviously an incredibly important organization dedicated to children's mental health. And he's also the author of The Scaffold Effect. And so that's going to be happening on March 10th. This presentation is on April 7th. And if you can screenshot this or just email info@thestudypro.com, or you just hang tight, you'll be getting an invitation, I think, quickly or soon for this. And then the last thing we'll say is that we do teach these skills if you are interested. We have a course for students that is 10 hours. And again, you can just email info@thestudypro.com. But with that, I know we did have a question that I'm just going to read. For Jen said, there's a tendency to put off the last task, the most open-ended and the most amorphous task until after all the routine, predictable work is done, because you want to check those routine, predictable pieces of work off. But then there's, of course, not enough time at the end. An example is an open-ended thesis. How do you manage that? What if you give yourself 30 minutes to work on it, but at the end of 30 minutes, you don't have anything to show for it? I see your slide for brainstorming, but the student might think that if they don't have a thesis at the end of brainstorming, they would have to redo the brainstorming again if they stop and pick it up later. Linz, do you want to comment on that? I know there's a little bit of a question about the question.
Yes. Yes, and please put in the chat if my sound is garbled, but I think the big takeaway for some of those open-ended ones is get more specific than brainstorming. Ways that we have helped kids be a bit more specific with some of those open-ended goals, like for brainstorming or picking topics or researching topics, we set a numeric goal, like a quantity. So I want to have 3 possible topics chosen today. And how I might go about that, I might chunk that down a little bit more. So I'm going to watch a video. I'm going to Google, read some articles on that. I might have a strategy or chunk within that, a goal within that goal. My target, my finish line is have maybe 3 topics. Another strategy that if they're given choices, different options of topics, that we've kind of used the March Madness bracket challenge of, okay, first we're going to get these 4 options on the whiteboard or on my brainstorming piece of paper here. And then I'm going to do process of elimination of which one wins? Does this one win or this one win? Okay, we eliminate it. Which one wins? This one. And then you're down to 2, and then you're down to your 1. But the takeaway there is this is not an always rule, but we try to stick away from time goals and more target goals. So I'm going to brainstorm for 30 minutes, but that's 30 minutes of brainstorming is completely unstructured for the developing frontal lobe and execution brain that they need strategies for there. So we actually give them a target to hit. So say it might be, I want to come up with 3 topics there. And then they feel more successful. Then after brainstorming, the goal isn't necessarily to have a thesis at the end of a brainstorming session, but it's just to have maybe a narrowed topic there.
So I don't know if there's any other questions, but Dana, do you want us just to wrap it up? Thank you, Allison, for your comments, and everybody else for your comments.
Thank you so much to both of you. I thought we would just see for maybe another minute if there are any questions. I found this very helpful as well. We have kids in our family as well. I've been watching as a parent. If we have anybody who would like to just post any further questions, I just wanted to give you another second. Maybe if anyone posts anything further, we can just go ahead and address it. But meanwhile, let me say thank you so much to Debbie and Lindsay of the StudyPro. This was terrific. Thank you. And our thanks again to Janet Pence, our family network chair who puts together our programs. We're very grateful to Janet for all of her work. And I think I see something else in the chat. Ah, it was another set of thanks. Lots of thank yous. How kind you all are, and you're absolutely right. I loved this also. Okay, if we don't have, oh, here we have. Okay, do you have quick advice about how to plan breaks in the work? Ah,
Yes. So what I'll first acknowledge is the number one thing we hear from parents when it comes to breaks and kids is they don't like to take breaks. And the reason is they don't like to take breaks is because they know themselves well enough to know that reinitiating is hard. We want to make reinitiating easier. We want to make the breaks structured, not painfully structured, but to say, what is a good end goal for my break? Scrolling on TikTok, checking my phone, there's no good end goal. So some of the break activities that we have like a basketball hoop, we have darts, we have a coloring book, we have a beanbag chair, anything like that. But we wanted to set a timed break, like 5 minutes. Okay, I can probably get the 10 basketball shot within 5 minutes. So how we structure it when we're supporting our kids with homework is it's 30 minutes on and then take a 5-minute break. From some of our older kids, it's like 5 minutes on and then a 5-minute break. But then that structure is there of when that break is over, and we help them reinitiate and help them learn how to reinitiate. It's a simple tip, but it's a really effective one. If you are taking a break, don't write down where you left off. Write down where you're going to pick up. So if it's a math assignment, I have them like highlight the next math problem. If it's something they're writing, I have them start that sentence and leave off the sentence half unfinished. That's okay. It just makes that on-ramping a little bit easier when they're coming back from a break. So the takeaway from breaks is like making it time, making it structured, making it non-electronic. They're just too hard to break away from it. And then help with the reinitiating back into the homework. That's where the real barrier is. They don't want to take breaks.
And Dima, your opposite problem. Oh, sorry. Dima, your opposite problem. They want to take a break. I think some of that advice actually really applies to you as well. One of the things that, and Lindsay can pick up from here, but one of the things that, a couple of things that she said, I think applies. One is being very specific about, what your child will accomplish, right? So, instead of work for 30 minutes, even, depending on what the work is, X numbers of problems, maybe even put things on, we sometimes do on a whiteboard, the numbers of the problems if they're doing something with math, or, brainstorming some ideas for structure, and then making sure that those breaks are very structured. Those are the kinds of things that Lindsay already talked about. And Lindsay, I'm sure you may have something to add. And I was even thinking about the use of a time timer so that as the red disappears, she knows that that's the time she gets to take a break. But before that, no.
Yeah. I mean, and what we do as part of our training for our staff too is that before you walk away, before you break away from that student, is ask them what their target is. So in this next 30 minutes, in this next 45, I see you're working on these math problems. What's your goal? What's your target within that 30 minutes? And we had that with a high schooler senior who she was making these very tedious flashcards for her AP Psych class. And she had a lot to do that night. And I go, okay, well, in this next 30 minutes, I don't care about the whole night. I don't care about the next 4 hours ahead of you. I care about the next 30 minutes ahead of you. What's the goal? And then she said, okay, well, I think my goal is going to make 6 of these. And then she actually made 8. But then she was like feeling really invigorated. So it kept her from like wanting to take breaks too much because she had a very clear target. And then right when that timer was about up, she finished that last A1, put it aside. And then the student, she's playing chess. She is electronic, but she's playing chess on her breaks in her beanbag. And then she like came back into the next state. And it was just really great to see because she realized like how great it was to give herself a very specific goal.
Shall we say last call on questions? Any last ones? Give it a couple seconds in case anybody is just in the process of typing. Okay. Well, this has been fantastic, very helpful. I understand we'll be able to send not only the slides, or I'm sorry, not only the recording, but the slides. And we would like to put that up in our newsletter and on our website as well for anybody who wasn't able to make it tonight. So thank you very much. Thanks very much, Debbie Rosen and Lindsay Toms of the StudyPro. Thank you so much for everything here tonight. And thanks to everyone who attended.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks
Good
for
night,
having us.
everyone.
Good night.